Let's talk a little bit more about it. We have Mohammed Shehada joining us. He's the Chief of Communications for the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor and is originally from northern Gaza. Mohammed, understandably, when this conflict started, many human rights groups were anxious not to overstate what was happening or to use emotive or inflammatory language. But there is now a growing consensus that what's happening there is a genocide and certainly a crime against humanity. Organisations like Human Rights Watch, Médecins Sans Frontières, ECCHR, they've all been saying things like that. What's your organisation's position as we head into 2025?
Well, basically, it's one of the most well-documented and the most live-streamed genocide in human history. You have never had a case where the perpetrators of such a crime against humanity of this enormous magnitude confess daily to the intention to destroy a group in whole or in part, whether it's Israeli politicians like the prime minister, defense minister, and others, or the generals in the field, or the soldiers executing the commands of the political and security establishment in Israel. Let alone the videos that Israeli soldiers themselves publish constantly of destroying everything standing in their place, of starving people in mass, of letting hundreds of bodies decompose on the ground and get eaten by cats and dogs, of basically soldiers running over hundreds of Palestinians over their bodies, dead and alive, and crushing them with tanks, turning them into mush. So there has never been such a case of blatant genocidal intent so declared so shamelessly by the perpetrators as this one today.
Mohammed, you're from Gaza. As you say, so much of this has been documented. We've been able to see the pictures on our screens. What's it like for you watching this happen to your homeland?
Well, basically, I've lived through at least 3 wars, 10 military operations, and 2 grand invasions. That's how we measure our age in Gaza. The average Gazan has lived through 5 wars. And I've never seen anything close to this one, not in terms of magnitude, scale, severity. For example, since this genocide started, one question that I ask to everyone is how many relatives you lost. The second is your home still standing? Usually the answer to the first one is in the dozens. It's never below 35. My own family, I lost about 35 members and I stopped counting. That was the case in February. I couldn't cope anymore and keep account of it. Every person that I know, every family member had their homes bombed or burned to the ground or destroyed by soldiers. So basically, like there is this systematic effort to wipe out Gaza's ability to host any organized human life in the long-term future. And it's a very grim prospect to reckon with as a Gazan myself, this full destruction of my universe, that the Gaza that I know is gone by now. And it's not just the destruction of everything, literally. It's also the tormenting of people to the extent of turning them into ghosts, shells of their former selves. So my grandmother made it out of Gaza about a year ago. My mom at the time, she wrote me immediately and said, "You have to come and see her. She's not going to live for long." And ever since she's been incapacitated, I remember her from Gaza as this beautiful, healthy woman. When she came out, she was basically skin and bone. Her legs were swollen in a very frightening way, and she's been bedridden ever since. My cousin Maisa also made it out of Gaza and survived. And I went to Egypt to see her. I couldn't recognize her on the street anymore. She was to be this tall and healthy and beautiful woman. She literally shrunk. Her back was hunched. Her skin is wrinkled and rough and darkened by just the mere prolonged starvation, let alone the enormous mental damage. Like everyone I know in Gaza has the mentality that they are inmates on a death row, that it's their turn anytime soon, including children. So you hear suicidal thoughts from kids as young as 8 or even 6 years old who are saying, "When am I going to die?" I was recently a footage of a young girl telling her cat, "Please, when I die, don't eat my corpse. Try to find any other food, but not my corpse." It's absolutely insane.
Mohammed, I'm so sorry for your losses, and our thoughts here at TRT Well go out to you and your families and those of so many others in Gaza. There's been so much condemnation and yet so little international action so far. Do you have any hope that 2025 will be any different?
Well, at the turn of 2024, I had more hope. Back then, there was a lot of rhetorical prowess exercised by the EU or the Biden administration. There was a grim chance that Biden will crack down on this before the elections are kicking in. But now all that hope evaporated. I've been intimately following the details of the ceasefire negotiations. There was a deal in July, on July 2nd, that Hamas accepted, Israel's team accepted, the US accepted, and then Netanyahu decided to torpedo. Biden decided, ever since, to gaslight the world and say that Israel accepted and Hamas rejected. The negotiations, ever since, they keep going through the same cycle of Hamas showing some flexibility, according to mediators that I talk to that are talking to Hamas and Israel torpedoing the talks, and the White House basically blaming it all on the Palestinians. So it's very, very grim in that regard. My only hope is that with Trump's administration, liberal mainstream media that has been so complacent and complicit in the genocide tends to be more critical of a Trump administration than a Biden one. So they might be more outspoken on the genocide in Gaza by then. And that's basically my main hope at the moment.
All right, Mohammed Shehada, thank you so much for joining us on the News Hour on TRT World. Thank you for sharing your story as well. We're really grateful. And as you say, we will all be watching this very closely as we go into